such as an Impel Down when Blackbeard says that Impel Down Luffy has stronger haki than Jaya Luffy had, and this young lad Luffy didn't even know what haki was yet. Hey, what's up everybody, it's LeeLos, and today we're talking about why Gear 5 versus Kaido is obvious. Stay steady in pursuit of your dreams and goals, you're born to win, you're made for greatness, and I definitely believe in you guys. Keep up the great work each and every day. So Wano starts off with full power, maxed out, enraged Luffy being relative to First Division commanders, then finishes with him pulling Yonko tier feats in his golly gosh dang base form. In this video we're explaining every single power-up Luffy received in Wano. Luffy and Kaido battle 5 different times, in each battle Luffy has a different power level. Then we're discussing how full power Luffy versus full power Kaido would go if they were to have a fresh, uninterrupted rematch in the arcs after Wano to see if anything changes. So let's start with Luffy versus Kaido round 1, aka Luffy's first club down. In this fight, Luffy is fresh off a massive training arc, otherwise known as Whole Cake Island. This arc confirms the concept of Haki Blooms to be a real deal combo meal in the One Piece series.
Oh no, I got something for you!
It's me!
Yeah, I got something for you!
Yo! Why do you have so much power?
Oh, you not done?
Rayleigh states that the flower of Haki blooms in the extreme conditions of real battle. The more you face off against strong enemies, the stronger you will become. So, in other words, the more tussles the Straw Hats get themselves into, the better they get at tussling. It's confirmed here, but a lot of earlier moments in the series imply Haki blooms have always existed, even in the good old pre-time skip, such as an Impel Down when Blackbeard says that Impel Down Luffy has stronger haki than Jaya Luffy had, and this young lad Luffy didn't even know what haki was yet. Zoro also says in Enies Lobby that surviving, traveling from island to island makes them stronger, and this is proven to be true by the pre-time skip Straw Hats beating up continuously stronger and stronger opponents without needing to pause for a training arc until they reached Sabaody. Their enemies were getting stronger and the Straw Hats were still pulling out the steady W's because traveling the seas and the experience points they gained from their battles and adventures made them stronger. Best example of this being Nami. Start of series Nami was relative in power to normal One Piece civilians. Then after a couple islands and some gear upgrades from Usopp, she was one-shotting, reacting to, and withstanding attacks from Khalifa, an elite superhuman assassin who would no-diff destroy every powerful villain that Luffy struggled to defeat in the East Blue. The more One Piece characters fight, the stronger they become. The experience and gear they gain from adventures on each island makes them more powerful as well. Luffy starts whole cake relative to Doflamingo and 3rd Division commanders like Jack. Then Luffy fought Cracker for 11 hours, proceeds to get wailed upon by Sanji until he was KO'd. Then Luffy big time brawls an entire army. Luffy then escapes being captured, finds and then brawls a unit of this same army for a second time, folding everyone in the process. Then engages in some fisticuffs with the goated chef himself. Gets slammed by Katakuri, clashes with Big Mama, and I'm not talking about Medea, the most powerful person he's ever clashed with in all his living days at this point, by the way. Then he has a small rumble with Perospero, a character who rivals Doflamingo in power and actually has surpassed Doflamingo in bounty. Then he fights Katakuri for 11 hours. This fight essentially turns into an 11-hour Haki private tutor session with Sensei Katakuri. Luffy gains so much power from Haki blooms throughout this fight that Gear 3 begins matching the power of Peerless Donut, when in the beginning of the fight Gear 3 was just getting overwhelmed by unnamed copycat attacks from Katakuri. Luffy then learns to see the legitimate actual future, pulls one of the highest difficulty W's of all his young days, then survives a sea battle against Big Mom. All those power-ups, all those hands being ran, all those Haki blooms and XP points, all of that, and then you got a fresh, enraged, amped out to the max Luffy, goes up and wails on Kaido with his strongest attacks. Kaido genuinely can't even feel it, then proceeds to one-tap Luffy only to reveal he was absolutely hammered out of his willies the entire time and didn't even come close to taking the fight seriously. Which is also Oda driving home the point that the gap between First Division commanders and Yonkos is hilariously gigantic. Kaido does, in one attack, what Katakuri failed to do after throwing his strongest attacks at Luffy for 11 hours. Check out my Luffy vs Zoro video after this one for more information on the difference between First Division commanders and Yonkos. So this talk show is going to be different than the other ones. Usually I just have notes or like free flow it, but this time I have an actual thick, nice script for you. I didn't want to throw it away, so I just said, screw it, let's do it this way. Alright, let's go. After receiving a hockey bloom from getting his socks knocked off by Kaido, Luffy gets locked up and has a prison arc, and he uses it as a nice fresh training sesh. So this arc is specifically designed to increase Luffy's physical strength and develop an ancient form of samurai hockey called Ryo. Luffy's nerfed, he can't use his devil fruit powers at all because he has sea stone prism cuffs on, so Luffy just turns all his prison work into his personal gains program. Back in pre-time skip, sea stone made Luffy so weak he couldn't even stand or talk straight, but now he can have sea stone cuffs on and still carry dozens of boulders weighing several tons on his back and straight up do wind sprints with them like a Giga Chad. It's similar to the gravity training done in Dragon Ball Z. They train in hundreds of times normal gravity in Dragon Ball Z, and then once they return to the normal stories, gravity, they're way faster and stronger. The same thing's happening here in One Piece. When Luffy returned to the rooftop for his round 2 battle with Kaido, all of his physical stats are increased from his prison training, and in addition to that, he's also learned Ryo, which is the samurai hockey that does internal damage regardless of the opponent's durability. Luffy starts the fight using Red Rock, and as the fight progresses, Luffy unveils an entire new series of attacks titled the Rock Series. There's still mysteries surrounding Luffy's fire abilities, but the Rock Series is implied to be Gear 2, Gear 3, and Conqueror's Haki all at the same time. Gear 2 and Gear 3 combo was something his body was too weak to withstand before, even after training with Rayleigh, but through this fight with Kaido after the prison arc training, this appears to be no big deal to Luffy anymore. He combos both of these gears with zero drawbacks stated or shown. Either that, or Luffy gained so much muscle after being locked up in the slammer that now he throws Gear 3 punches so fast that Oda just chooses to draw them with the same invisible punch going too fast to see art style effect that he does for Gear 2 attacks. Basically where it looks like Luffy's just blapping them with an air cannon, it's really his hands are just going so fast that Oda's drawing it as invisible to see. So now Luffy's either using both Gear 2 and Gear 3 simultaneously with no drawbacks, or Luffy's Gear 3 is just so fast now after the prison training that we can't tell the difference in speed anymore between Gear 3 and Gear 2. Luffy, after giving a good brawl his very best using Ryo and all of his prison gains, ends up getting pancake crushed again. This second L leads to Luffy awakening Advanced Conqueror's Haki, which is one of the biggest power-ups ever displayed in One Piece, and this power-up is really only rivaled by when Blackbeard got Whitebeard's Earthquake Fruit during the end of Marineford. Luffy was approaching top tier without Conqueror's Haki, with Conqueror's Haki being Luffy's special affinity strong suit Haki to begin with. His defense and durability both shoot up to Yonko tier in his base form once he unlocks Advanced Conquerors, and Advanced Conquerors being a form that only the upper echelon of the upper echelon can ever possibly attain, and the massive foreshadowing that's been applied to the importance of Conqueror's Haki since chapter 1 with Shanks using it, all the way to Marineford where all of the top tiers on the battlefield were freaking out seeing this rookie use Conqueror's Haki. This arc reveals why Conqueror's Haki is such a big deal, because the power-up's insane. The honest truth is you need to be at least an Admiral level combatant to give Luffy a challenging fight at this point, because Advanced Conqueror's Haki is the biggest power-up Luffy's ever received in the entire series. It's far bigger than Gear 4 is. Luffy goes from getting one shot in Gear 4 to being strong enough to match these same Gear 4 killing blows, but Luffy's matching them in base form and he's near death. Something to consider is that it was base form Kaido that one-shot Gear 4 Luffy start of Wano, but now Man Beast form Kaido is clashing and splitting the sky with base Luffy. Man Beast form pre-time skip, Luffy versus Lucci, was shown to be relative to a Gear 2 level power increase. Simplest way you can explain that is when they were in base form, Luffy and Lucci were relative to each other. Then Luffy goes Gear 2, Lucci goes Man Beast form, and they're still relative to each other. So it shows that Gear 2 and Man Beast form back in pre-time skip were around the same power increase. When you see Kaido in Man Beast form, just imagine Kaido going Gear 2, Luffy's in base form, and they're able to clash with each other now. So that's how big of a power-up Advanced Conqueror's Haki was for Luffy. Luffy becomes so much stronger that he could literally one-shot his start of Wano self in base form. Like, he could fight start of Wano Luffy while that guy's in Gear 4, and this current Advanced Conqueror's Haki Luffy would just one-tap him in base. Luffy being a guy who's had to struggle for every singular scrap of progress he's ever made in power throughout his entire life. Literally, this kid lost thousands of fights before he learned how to punch straight. Then all of a sudden, after nearly 20 years of non-stop grinding, Luffy's base form suddenly surpasses what his max power was just a moment ago. Similar to Blackbeard when he got Whitebeard's fruit and thought he could suddenly solo Garp, Sengoku, and all of the admirals by himself? Luffy was on a massive power high. Luffy tells Law that he thinks he can solo Kaido now. Luffy puts up a fight, but he ends up getting clapped. That was Luffy's third loss to Kaido. Luffy would have died here if he wasn't rescued by Law's crew, because he fell into the water and he was drowning. So then Luffy gets back up, receives another Haki Bloom, eats some grub, regens that HP because Luffy's body works like a Toriko character. It's actually stated in the Udon prison arc that Kid and Law are both near death when they're thrown in jail, but after a few days of eating and sleeping, they were back to 100% health and energy. Then they remarked that Kid and Law both have weird bodies. There's numerous examples of this throughout the series, such as versus Katakuri when Luffy goes from fat to skinny by jogging for a couple seconds. He does a similar thing after fighting Cracker as well. It started out as somewhat of a joke, but this theme has transitioned into being an actual legitimate part of the story now as time has gone on. So all this while Luffy's taking a break, healing, and becoming even more powerful, Kaido is in the middle of battling Yamato, a character ranked higher than King, has advanced Conqueror's Haki, and is stated by Kaido to have gotten even stronger than before. Fresh Luffy rejoins the fight, hits a massive assist combo attack with Yamato on Kaido. Then Luffy begins fighting this exhausted Kaido again one-on-one. At this point, Yamato herself says that Kaido is reaching his limit, and if Momo doesn't start lifting Onigashima, then Kaido's gonna drop the island. This exhausted Kaido, who was so close to his limit that he was getting tired from what was before shown to just be a casual, almost zero difficulty ability for him, a Kaido that's this exhausted, then 1v1 fights this stronger than ever super fresh Luffy, and he literally kills him. Okay, so while Kaido's more nerfed than ever and Luffy's more amped than ever, Kaido still kills him. But before dying, Luffy was so strong that now Kaido states that he has accepted Luffy, and it's heavily implied that he holds Luffy in the same caliber of respect as he does for Oden. Oden being a character who was so strong that one attack from him 20 years ago gave Kaido PTSD to this very day. Basically, Kaido considers Luffy to be his rival now because Luffy has proven himself as a man who can match Kaido in his current state and push him to a very high difficulty fight. Kaido and Big Mom battle one another for a period of time very recently before this raid happened, and Kaido in this current battle with Luffy says it has been a long time since he's fought someone at this level, meaning Luffy and Kaido versus Luffy round 4 is impressing Kaido even more than Big Mom did, which further feeds into the narrative that Luffy is a top tier in the verse now. Earlier in the fight, Kaido envisions Luffy's ceiling and sees silhouettes of people whose power he's respected and considers rivals. We see the top tiers, Oden, Shanks, Roger, but Kaido is still questioning whether or not Luffy will live up to this power. Kaido accepting Luffy implies Kaido now believes Luffy is, in fact, living up to this ceiling. He's the real deal, and he's in the same tier of power. But to clarify, Luffy would still get absolutely curb stomped by Roger or Prime Whitebeard or Prime Garp, but Luffy is still solidly a Yonko tier fighter right now. Roger and Whitebeard are stated by numerous legends in the series to be the top 2 of the previous era. Crocodile says in Impel Down that the world is full of people who lost to those 2 monsters, and we see in level 6 of the prison Impel Down where the lowest confirmed non-ex-warlord bounty was 550 million. Nearly all the guys in there wanted revenge against Roger and Whitebeard. In other words, a lot of them got slammed by Roger and Whitebeard, and many people in the same caliber of power as Zoro and Sanji today were absolutely crushed by the overwhelming might of young Whitebeard and Roger in their prime. In a time where other potentially Yonko tier combatants like Shiki roamed the seas, Roger and Whitebeard were in a league of their own, with the only confirmed Marine that consistently threw hands with these monsters being Garp. As Garp is stated to have nearly killed Roger several times, a feat that no one else has been given in the entire series, it's literally the most impressive lore statement in One Piece. To be able to say that you've nearly killed the Pirate King several times yourself is by far the most impressive lore statement. And just something I want to say right here is like, there really isn't any more need to power scale Garp other than that. A lot of people, there's a lot of agendas and stuff where people try and downplay Garp. Like, what you guys need to understand about Garp, let me just say this really quickly. This isn't even on my script, but this is something I just want to say so that everyone can understand this. Garp is literally the exact same thing as if Roger, the Pirate King, as if he never got sick and never stopped training. That's who Garp is right now, because he was Roger's equal and then just never got sick and never stopped training. And it's shown in recent chapters that he's had like the same training routine ever since he was young. So if there's anyone in One Piece, any old man in One Piece who's lost the least amount of power from their prime, it's Garp, because that man's not sick and he's done nothing but train, and a lot of power in One Piece is dependent upon hockey anyway. So yeah, I mean, just imagine, like, every time you see Garp, just imagine if Gold Roger was still alive and he was 79 years old and was not sick at all. Just imagine that. That is who Garp is. So anyone who's trying to tell you that like Garp wouldn't have killed Akainu in pre-time skip, or anyone downplaying Garp anything below Admiral level, even in his old age, is just straight up tripping, dude. Anyways, back to the script. As Garp is stated to have nearly killed Roger several times, and Sengoku is also praised by Roger as someone he believes who could have captured him while he was in his sick state. Narratively, Roger, Whitebeard, Garp, and Sengoku are all in their own tier above the top tiers. They are the pinnacle of power in One Piece, and right below them is the Yonko tier fighters, where the boy Luffy has finally made it. I'm not including characters like Emu or Joy Boy, who are complete mysteries, but based off of how Emu's being portrayed, it's pretty safe to assume Emu's also top tier. Okay, so if you're an anime only, I would recommend you leave the video here. This is where the Gear 5 stuff comes into play, and I'm gonna use all of the lore. Yeah, so it's gonna spoil the entire ending of Wano for you. So I'll give you 5 seconds to leave, come back to this video once you're finished Wano, then watch my Gear 5 is Perfect video. It's an hour of me explaining why Gear 5 is the pinnacle of shonen. So Luffy respawns after death, we don't know why or how, then his Devil Fruit awakens. Luffy goes Gear 5 Looney Tune mode, breaks the internet on several occasions. Instead of me doing another hour-long explanation analyzing everything about Gear 5 like Sherlock freaking Holmes, here's me summarizing Gear 5 in as few words as possible. In Gear 5, Luffy can turn himself and everything around him into rubber. He has the previous powers of all his other gears, but enhanced, and he has a dash of cartoon force powers sprinkled in there. Just a dash, a teaspoon even. The big thing to keep in mind is that currently Gear 5 actually has limitations. A lot of people don't like that, but Oda's written it straight into the series, plain as day to see. This is a common pattern Oda follows when introducing new gears for Luffy. They're powerful abilities, and the fandom starts to think that Luffy's invincible for a while, but then it's revealed slowly that the big powers come with big drawbacks and limitations until Luffy masters them. Luffy is indeed a Yonko tier fighter, but don't let the hype of this recent wild transformation trick you into thinking Luffy's invincible. Fans thought Luffy was invincible after he beat Lucci in Gear 2, only to realize that Luffy was still fodder to the new world. Oda has patterns in his writing, so I'm just telling you that to give you guys a heads up. For example, Gear 2 pre-time skip was literally killing Luffy, draining his life force like a battery, losing power every time he used it back in pre-time skip, and Gear 3 made him unable to fight afterwards for a period of time. But now, after 2 years of training with Rayleigh and surviving the New World adventures, Luffy can now spam both of these gears at the same time, simultaneously, while also using 4 elite levels of hockey, all at the same time, and he does it with 0 drawbacks. It's because he's mastered his gears, and he's become more powerful. In the manga, Luffy is stated to be limited only by his imagination. Luffy himself believes this, and says, "I feel like I can do anything now. I can do anything I've ever wanted." So he's straight up on a Gojo level power high, then proceeds to do the most unimaginable Looney Tune tomfoolery that still looks absolutely cold. But then Luffy still proceeds to eat numerous knuckle Sammys from Kaido, and has to pull out an extreme diff W against him, where Luffy immediately passes out afterwards. The fight was so close it was literally seconds away from being a double KO. So despite feeling like Luffy could do anything, and doing things far outside of the realm of his normal abilities, and being stated to only be limited by his imagination, he still cannot low diff Kaido. He still struggles with Kaido, meaning that this power has a limit and it's relative to Kaido. In addition to turning himself and other things into rubber, Luffy occasionally just defies the laws of physics and reality, but every time Luffy does something that's reality defying, these things are more meant to just be silly jokes that make the reader and the people around him laugh. Like, Luffy hasn't been using it to create like spirit bombs and slamming them into earth and things like that. He's more doing it to just do Looney Tune joking gags, like running and his feet turn into a circle, or when he's surprised his eyes pop out of his head. Just silly things like that. There's still a lot of mysteries around the form, but keeping Oda's intent in mind from his interviews gives context to the limitations of the power. Basically, Oda says, bro, this is my manga. I want Luffy to be able to do some goofy, cartoony stuff because it's fun to draw. I like cartoons, bro. This is my manga, and I want to have fun drawing my manga. So that's like why he put Gear 5 in the story based off of his interviews. Then the only time we see Luffy doing reality bending things outside of the realm of just turning things into rubber, he does it for gags, like eyes popping out in surprise or Luffy running on the air. Another thing to keep in mind is that before Luffy goes Gear 5, Kaido is already stated by Yamato to be reaching his limits. So much so that she's worried he'll drop Onigashima. This Kaido, who is exhausted from fighting a gauntlet of some of the strongest characters in One Piece and literally beating every single one of them, this exhausted Kaido is still pushing this Luffy, who believes he has no limits and is on a power high at the same time, going hammy-sammy, Gear 5 to the absolute limit, and this exhausted Kaido is still pushing Luffy to the max. And I just want to take this moment to say One Piece is the only series I've ever seen that could pull Gear 5 off and still make it this epic. Like, in the most recent episode of One Piece, it was absolutely fire. That, like, this, everything they're adding to Gear 5 is so cool. I could go on and on about that forever, so much so that I'm probably going to make another video on it, but it takes huge courage to have your most high stakes, most highly anticipated, important battle in the entire series so far, and then ending it with a Looney Tunes transformation. But Oda straight up still makes it absolutely epic. Gear 5 is my favorite gear. It's honestly genius, and in my opinion, it perfectly represents the mysteries of One Piece as a whole. I mean, what kind of mad lad writes a 1,000 plus chapter manga, then reveals his character's final power-up, and the power-up itself has lore and mysteries in it? That's how deep the lore and mystery in One Piece goes. The power-ups have mystery. Like, the power-ups have lore, dude. It's crazy. Anyways, Luffy pulls the extreme diff absolute W, but Oda clearly paints a picture here that Gear 5 has limits, and Kaido is him. Kaido versus Luffy was a battle of hymns, but as Luffy goes on to master Gear 5, it's possible more of these limits that Gear 5 has currently will fade away, and Gear 5 could become even more powerful, especially if someone can teach Luffy about what the Sun God actually is and what his powers really are. I talked about this in one of my other videos, but we still don't even know if the Sun God was a real person. He could have been a myth. He could have been really anything. But we'll have to wait and see what Oda wants to do with Gear 5. The really interesting thing is Luffy's not mastered Gear 4 yet either, but Oda has been showing Gear 4 evolving. The smoke around Luffy's body in Gear 4 is now forming the same shape as Luffy's smoke in Gear 5, and Luffy has been shown to be able to expand the size of his fist at will without needing to inflate his bones anymore. And we also see Luffy transition from Snake Man to Bounce Man during his battle with Kaido as well. So these advancements with Gear 4 are not explained with text, it's just something you see visually as Luffy's fighting in Wano. He just starts doing things with his fruit that he was never able to do before, and it's heavily implied that this was either a sign that Luffy's fruit was ready to awaken, or that Luffy has become so powerful with his devil fruit that now all of his gears have evolved and have been affected by the maturation of his devil fruit abilities. So to put it simply, in Wano, Luffy evolved just about as much as he did during the entire 2-year time skip. But really, Wano is the arc where the compound effect of all of Luffy's life training finally pays off. He gains the devil fruit power-ups, hockey power-ups, physical strength power-ups, new hockeys altogether, durability power-ups, a new gear that's also an awakening. Long story short, Luffy is just objectively him now, and no one in the One Piece world really wants to to tussle with Luffy anymore, except for the crazy people. And some people don't like how fast Luffy grew in Wano, but I mean, what you need to consider is that the series has been going on for 26 years and Luffy's still not the strongest guy in his series. In most shonen, the main character is the strongest guy within like 4 or 5 arcs. One Piece has been going on 26 years, Luffy's still not the strongest guy. And something else worth mentioning is that out of all of Luffy's rivals, Luffy was the last one to awaken his devil fruit. Okay, so now let's get into Egghead Island Luffy. So this would be Luffy after Wano full power versus healthy Kaido after Wano full power. So I'll give a simple, logical, narrative answer first, then I'll just justify the answer with math. Not everyone is a big fan of scaling using math, so I'm saving it second. Okay, so narratively, Kaido still packs up Luffy like a lunchbox. Okay, so Kaido versus Luffy was never truly a 1v1. It was a 1v12. Luffy was just one of those 12, and he lost 4 times and finally won on the 5th battle. Luffy did the majority of the damage out of the 12 combatants, but considering how powerful all of them were, and the absolutely disgusting list of full power attacks Kaido took straight to the chest, it would be completely disingenuous of me to say that they had no effect on Kaido. Kaido got hit by a Gamma Knife, a Shura, a combo attack from Gear 4 Luffy and Yamato, which are 2 advanced Conqueror Haki users at the exact same time, and fought 2 Mink bosses in Sulong at the same time, then still proceeded to beat 100% Luffy 4 times in a row. If you swapped Kaido with Luffy and had Luffy fight this gauntlet of OP characters instead, it's obvious to see who's more powerful here. Kaido is still more powerful than Luffy, and Oda himself states this in an SBS by saying Luffy's not strong enough to beat Kaido with a punch, which is why he had Kaido get slammed and jumped by 12 upper division commander fighters back to back. It was basically a bunch of people loosening up the pickle jar, and Luffy was just the one who actually opened the jar himself. So now let's get into the math areas of it. So my estimate from reading the series and thinking about it closely is that currently Luffy is roughly about 75% to 85% of full power Kaido when he goes from base form to gear 5, with base form being 75% of Kaido's full power and gear 5 being 85% of Kaido's full power. But Luffy's finishing move, the Bajrang gun, is so strong that it might actually be even stronger than 100% Kaido, because Kaido and Luffy were both near death during the Bajrang gun Susanoo Dragon clash. Luffy did his strongest attack ever shown, Kaido did his strongest attack ever shown, and Luffy overpowered him. So in simple terms, it's like this. Base form Luffy is 75% of Kaido's power, gear 5 Luffy is 85% of Kaido's power, Bajrang gun is 100% to 101% of Kaido's power. Here's some calculations that back that up. So first, to gauge the difference in power between Luffy and Kaido, let's look at a few factors. So first, let's analyze this question. How much does damage weaken a character in One Piece? For example, let's say Kaido is at 100% health and has taken 0 damage. Kaido's Thunder Bagua attack does 100 points of attack power. Now, when Kaido takes damage and his health is at 50% and he's weakened and tired, does Thunder Bagua now drop to 50% attack power? Or, here's an alternative, do One Piece characters work like Pokemon, where as long as they're still conscious, they still do the same damage that they would have if they were at full power? For example, in the Pokemon games, when Pikachu does Thunderbolt, Thunderbolt does 100 points of attack power, whether Pikachu is fresh right out of the Pokemon Center, or if Pikachu's confused, poisoned, and at 1 HP. Pikachu's just built like that, and his attacks will do the same damage either way. Which of these is true for One Piece? A good method to figure out a reasonable answer to this is to look at how damage affected relative characters' attack power. Whitebeard in Marineford is still a monster and outputs so much power near death that it surprises many people around him. Prime Whitebeard was shown thrashing Odin without much difficulty, and he might not have even been using advanced conquerors. And Odin is relative to modern day admirals, seeing how one attack from this man gave Kaido 20 years of PTSD from pure respect alone. Whitebeard in his prime was capable of mid-diffing admiral level opponents, and really only went all out against top tiers like Roger. The gap between Odin and Whitebeard being further emphasized by Odin saying Whitebeard's power was unimaginable for himself. So Whitebeard went from mid-diffing admirals in his prime, to going all out enraged full power extreme diff just to momentarily defeat one admiral. So in this near death state, what used to be mid diff in his prime was now extreme diff at old age and near death. It's not an exact one-to-one comparison because Whitebeard was old and sick in addition to being tired, but if you apply a similar scale to Kaido, it gives us a general ballpark. Something else to keep in mind is a lot of characters' attack power comes from Haki, which is directly linked to the will to fight. But Haki is also an energy level thing. You can run out of it and it gets weaker with time. All this being said, the nerf to Final Battle Rooftop Kaido would be less than the nerf near death Whitebeard had. I would say Final Battle Kaido was around 56% of his full power against an 80% Luffy, but Luffy was stronger than ever because of the Haki blooms. Then he kills Luffy even with this big of a gap in their HP bars. But Luffy's so powerful now that Kaido completely accepts Luffy as a worthy opponent, something Kaido did not do in their third battle even though Luffy had awakened Advanced Conquerors, proving Luffy got even stronger after losing a third time. The near-death Gear 5 Luffy defeats near-death Kaido in an extreme diff fight that really could have went either way. Now, in Egghead Island, for Luffy to be stronger than Kaido, he would have had to gain so much power from his last Haki bloom and then one-shotting Lucci that it would make up for the fact that exhausted Kaido still killed full power Luffy like a day ago. And it would have to compensate for all the damage done by Law, Kid, Zoro, Yamato, Ashura Doji, Raizo, Kinemon, Kawamatsu, Sulong versions of the Mink bosses. Like everyone in that list, other than Kinemon, ranges from 3rd Division Commander level to stronger than 1st Division Commander level. Luffy got bigger Haki blooms than that in Wano, but narratively that's not the direction Oda's going in Egghead Island. Luffy's still intimidated by the power of either Kizaru or a 5 Elder or both together, which makes sense. These are the only people who can even challenge Luffy anymore because they're the top tier fighters. But Luffy's narratively in a similar situation to where he was after he beat Katakuri. He beat Katakuri and he was relative to Katakuri, but if they were to have another fight at the start of Wano, it would still be an extreme diff fight. Luffy beat Kaido, but it was literally a 15 versus 1, and Luffy lost 4 times and won on his 5th life. All that being said, Kaido fought Luffy right now in Egghead Island. It would be a high difficulty fight, but Kaido would win in the end. And after the fight, Kaido would be exhausted to the point where a few 1st Division Commander fighters would be able to take him down. Like if Yamato, Zoro, and Sanji teamed up after Luffy went down, they would definitely win. That's how tired Kaido would be, especially if Luffy lands a Brajaron gun, then Kaido would be on his last limbs. But yeah, that was everything I wanted to say in this video, guys. Thank you guys for watching, and subscribe for more adventures.